Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis, and today's going to be a little bit different than what I normally do, although I think very, very important. We are going to talk about digital addiction. So, addiction to social media, just computer, all that stuff that we'll get into. I started thinking about this, and it's not only a problem, I think, for our children, but I think for adults too. And of course, now we have AI that's out there, and I know people are spending a lot of time on that. And you've probably heard me talk a little bit about that as it pertains to sleep at night, to kind of the blue light and to stay off that kind of thing right before you go to bed, just um, to improve your quality of sleep. But that's about as far as I've gone with it. And obviously, I preach a lot about just health optimization, and that's why I feel this topic is so important. Is because if you're spending a lot of time, on your phone, and especially again our kids, then I just feel like it's hard to be kind of optimized because you're just doing a lot of things, kind of in your brain, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but. Um, my guest is Mary Catherine. She is a licensed counselor as well as a life coach and also certified specifically for digital addiction. She's actually in the process of writing a book about it, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. And so I'm just anxious to learn more about this very important topic. So, Mary Catherine, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, Dr. Greg, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to speaking with you and sharing with your listeners. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I guess first tell us a little bit about you, kind of what you do, and then also how you got this interest. It's a pretty, specific thing. So what made you kind of focus on this path?
Well, I've been a licensed mental health counselor for 13 years, and so doing that for quite a while, working with children, teenagers, and adults, and also recently became a life coach when I wanted to take this path of being certified to treat digital addiction. What happened in my practice, I have a private practice. I wanted to expand more to work with families instead of just individuals and occasionally having the family in. So when I went down that path of family therapy, I discovered how much families are just arguing and fighting over screen time in their homes. And so I said, well, if I can focus in on this one issue, that might be really big. And so I got certified and I have done a lot of reading and educating myself beyond that. But it was my initial interest in just helping families more and working with the family as a whole that I thought more about just how much screen time is a constant struggle in so many households.
Hmm. Okay. Well, very good. Well, I guess we'll just kind of jump right to it. I mean, what exactly constitutes a digital addiction? Like, I mean, how much is too much screen time?
Right. Well, let me give you some symptoms. So that would be withdrawal from other people to, go to your bedroom with your screen, right? We see that so much with teenagers, but we can do that as adults as well. Anger, especially when you try to get your teenager or child to get off their device, if they throw a big fit, that represents too much attachment to that device, right? Children can have lower grades due to a lack of ability to focus. We can talk about ADHD here later as well. Poor communication skills, less eye contact. If they're not having those face to face conversations, they just don't have that practice. You see them not as happy as they used to be. You know, that zombie face we're starting to see, just that, just flat. And I'm seeing that in teenagers so much. And I'm like, this is not normal. And we need to sound the alarm that something needs to change. And just the rise in depression and anxiety in recent years, people can have fewer interests, and this can be adults and younger people. So once they just get hooked on that screen of social media or video games, that just becomes their only interest, and they lose interest in other activities that do not provide that dopamine spike that the video games and social media provide. And so other activities they used to enjoy don't provide the same thing, so they drop those. So feeling exhausted, but they can't sleep. You mentioned that for sure. The hugely negative impact on our sleep is a big deal, and we should not ignore that. Or, if you or your child, you seem stressed or depressed with no other apparent cause that can be identified, screen usage, I think, is behind all of that. So those are some of the symptoms that people can see.
Let's focus on kids and maybe teenagers for a little while, and then maybe we can come back to adults if we need to, because I feel like it's obviously a very big problem. I feel like what you just described is, I mean, I have two teenagers at home. I mean, I feel like it's the majority of teenagers. I mean, maybe 80, 90%. Is that too high? I mean, what's your estimate there that this affects?
Well, we have this term now, digital addiction or technology addiction, but people who don't want to call it that or are afraid to call it that, just overuse, okay, too much. And I don't think there necessarily needs to be a number of hours per day or per week that needs to be attached to that for a specific diagnosis. But yes, I mean, I think we all fall under the overuse category, right? And then some would really fall under the addiction category where you are seeing, especially, when a screen is taken away, just those, the withdrawal, the meltdowns, all of those things, the loss of pleasure in other activities. And we can talk about how screens, social media and video games attach into that same pathway that drug addiction and alcohol addiction. It's working that same pathway of dopamine and other neurochemicals that are addictive. And we know now for sure that those games and platforms were designed to be addictive. They're not addictive by accident. These social media companies, especially, hired psychologists to teach them what addictive properties are, what makes something addictive, and then they built those properties into their platforms. So we know, they want us to be staring at a screen for as many hours a day as possible, and it is just very terrible. We're seeing the results right now, and it is not good.
So, as parents, again, I'm talking about kids here. So, if we do nothing, okay, with these kids who, again, I feel like a very high percentage have a lot of those symptoms that you described. If we do nothing, what are the long-term manifestations of their digital addiction now as teenagers? I mean, 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Well, first of all, we're seeing results right now, and I'll get into later results as well. But the results right now is we have seen a huge increase in the diagnosis of anxiety and depression in young people. The CDC came out with a report that between the years 2007 and 2017, the suicide rate among those aged 10 to 14 tripled. And we just can't have that. We can't. And, there was also a study published or a survey published by Politico magazine. They surveyed 1,400 mental health professionals like myself, and they asked them, what do you think is the cause behind this steep rise in anxiety and depression among children? And the number one cause listed was social media.
Hmm.
So professionals like myself, we're pinpointing, we're talking to these children and teenagers who are suffering so much, and we're figuring out where it's coming from, and it's the social media. So mental health effects are right now, academic effects are right now. We'll talk about that more as well. But as far as long term, they're also not developing communication skills. So what does that mean for marriage and friendships down the road as an adult? They're not developing the executive functioning skills and emotional intelligence skills that they need for jobs. I talk to employers who are so frustrated with Gen Z and saying we're having to try to teach them these skills that, 10 and 20 years ago, those employees came in with the skills. And they are, just knowing that, okay, if we get rid of this employee, the next employee is going to have the same deficits because right now, Gen Z, they were raised on a screen, unfortunately, and we're seeing these, deficits. And so employment problems long term, relationship problems long term, just a whole list.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what can we as parents do about it? I mean, these kids now they have phones, iPhones at, gosh, really, really young. I mean, it's almost just a part of them. It's like a body part, and you take it away from them, and just like you said, they kind of freak out. So, if parents are listening and they're like, yeah, I mean, I know this is a problem, but it's just a touchy subject with my kid. I mean, give us some tips as parents as to how we regulate this a little bit.
So there's kind of two different things I would say. One, for parents with young children who don't have a phone yet and who aren't hooked on a screen, who don't have the iPad as a babysitter, I say you need to hold off on their screen use as long as possible. And as hard as that may be, I promise you it's worth it. And so little children coming up, hold off as long as possible. For those with teenagers who already have a device or who are already hooked on video games, one thing that many people have heard, by now is the concept of a digital detox. Okay, so just totally taking it away and see what happens, and you kind of detox yourself from these toxic screens. However, a lot of people are having trouble with that for many reasons. And first of all, is that if you really do it, it is kind of too much of a shock for the system. If you're going to do something like that, you have to prepare a lot ahead of time, and that's what I, as a coach, can help people with is the preparation phase ahead of time, and then I walk people through the whole process as well. But I'm also encouraged that there are companies now that are making phones that are designed specifically for teenagers, and they have a screen, but they do not have the hard wiring necessary to connect to the internet. And so your teenager can have, you know, a phone to be able to call you or text you or call grandma when they're out at their friend's house, but they're not on the internet, which is just very, very dangerous for them. I like to make this comparison that it's very easy, for parents today to say, okay, you're not going to go spend the night at a stranger's house. That's just an automatic, if we don't know the people, you're not going over there to spend the night. However, if your teenager or child has internet access in their bedroom, it's like a virtual sleepover.
Mhm.
You have no idea who they're talking to, what kind of situation that they're in, what kind of pressures they're feeling, and it's the whole world in this little device.
Mhm.
And teenagers and children, they are not ready for it. Their brains are not developed enough. The human brain is not fully developed until around age 26. And so, what we expose our brains to or not really has an impact on how our brain turns out. And so, children and teenagers who don't have that frontal lobe developed with the self control skills that they need, they're really suffering. And I feel like it's parents' jobs to protect them and help them.
Yeah. I don't, it's surprising to me that so many parents don't know that they can like block screen time or set up parameters. Like I've got an iPhone and my kids have an iPhone, but you can, you can have all kind of restrictions on that, but so many parents don't utilize that. And it just kind of
Right.
surprises me and they just give them free reign.
That's
What
scary.
in your professional opinion, you said there's not necessarily maybe a black and white cutoff time, but if you were advising parents and they're going to put some restrictions on the phone, do you like what would your recommendation be? 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day? I mean, give us some kind of ballparks there.
Well, I'll tell you that the American Academy of Pediatrics, they have put out a recommendation list with, ages of a child and how many hours per day or per week they recommend. However, I and other professionals that I talk to feel like that list is too lenient. Okay. So, one that I would agree with, they say no screen time under 2 years of age. So that, little babysitter that's so convenient to stick, your little 2-year-old with, please don't do that. You are priming them to be addicted and to be attached to that. Please don't. And then I would say it is about the hours per day, yes, but it's also about the content and what you're allowing them access to. And so I really don't. Here's one recommendation I would say with social media in general. I would say, wait for that until they're like 17. They're just not emotionally and mentally and cognitively ready for that type of social environment.
Hmm.
And that's, if you give it to them at 17 or whatever, that's plenty of time for them to be learning it, so to speak, in your house under your roof before they go off to college. I had a friend of mine who's a counselor, and he also is a professor at a college and he's interested in this topic as well. And he asked one of his classes, this class was of juniors and seniors in college. And he said, he asked them two questions. He asked, would you want to be able to just look through your child's phone and see everything, have full access to everything in your child's phone? And they all said yes. And then he said, at what age would you stop going through your child's phone and looking at all of the things? And they said, when they went to college.
Hmm.
So here are, kids, so to speak, who are about to graduate from college, and they're saying, we just grew up in that, and we know that it needs to be monitored. However, I also say parents who, think they're trying to keep up and monitor, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible for you to look at everything and see everything that your child has done on their phone in any one particular day.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty impossible. And the restrictions that you can put on your phone, that's nice, but also either your child or one of your child's friends, they know how to get around it. And that's too scary to me.
Hmm.
It's too scary.
So what can we do then? I mean, I've got a well, one going off to college actually, but
Hmm.
one, just
Hmm.
starting high school. Again, we use the restrictions on the phone. We have a time limit, cuts off at a certain time at night. Can we have to approve the contacts, things like that. Um, but if they're going to be able to get around that, because I would agree, a lot of them, they know more about the phones than we do, unfortunately. Um, I mean, what can we do? I mean, what is your advice to parents?
When your teenager already has social media and already has access to a lot of things, I think you can, do like you're doing, Dr. Greg, and put on as many restrictions as possible, and then just have as much conversation as possible and say, here are some of the negatives to this, and here's why you need to be careful, and just have lots of conversation around that. And also for teenagers and younger children, teaching them about brain health, about how they can have, their brain grow up to be, strong and smart. And here's the kind of environment their brain needs in order to be able to do that. And it's not in front of a screen. It's not scrolling social media. That's not how your brain grows into the healthy brain that it can be. And so I think that trying to put it into a positive light rather than, hey, we're going to start all these restrictions that they see as negative,
Hmm.
explaining the positive reasons of saying, your brain has got to have the chance to develop the best that it can, and these are your years. These are your
Hmm.
years right now.
Yeah.
So lots of conversation, and put the restrictions on and use them, but then just knowing that they can be gotten around, and any way you can restrict is good.
Hmm. What about texting? Because obviously, kids these days, I mean, they're texting from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed. Um,
Mhm.
do you include that under kind of this digital addiction, or is texting kind of different?
Well, I would say it's a little bit different, yes. And for that, I would just say, restrict the hours that they have their phone, and say, whether you say everybody puts their phone away at 8 p.m. or everybody puts their phone away at 6 p.m., start dinner time with no screens at the supper table. That's a clear rule, even though it might be hard at first if your teenagers are used to having the phone at the table, but that's a clear rule to say no phones, no electronics, no iPad at the table, and then saying, okay, everyone puts their phone and their electronic devices at this place of the house at this time. And so it's a little bit different, but it's a little bit the same, because just that screen time, like you said, the blue light at night
Hmm.
is not good, and they need to be doing so many other things for their brains to develop properly. They need to be outside. They
Hmm.
need to have that physical movement. I'm sure, you as a doctor, we've noticed how many young people now have those metabolic syndromes and the prediabetes that we used to never see in young people, and now it's coming. And I think that's partially due to the sedentary lifestyle, which is, of course, increased by screens, and then the rise in cortisol, especially with video games, but also social media. When your brain is in that fight or flight stress state, again, that's going to get your cortisol high and all of those hormones to cause weight gain and those types of physical health problems that are not okay.
Mhm. Okay. Um, well, let's kind of, I guess, shift to adults. How, I mean, obviously, I feel like a big, big problem with kids, but how big of problem is this for adults now?
It is a huge problem. I think social media is more common among women, and then video gaming may be more common among men. Even grown adult males are really attracted to video gaming. Although a recent survey, and I'm not sure what year, but it was a very recent survey, came out that now the largest demographic of people who game are women 18 years old and older.
Hmm.
And so the game, I think that is a very broad definition of gaming when it comes to like the little games you can play on your cell phone. If they count those as video games, then women, play Candy Crush and all of these just crazy games that are, useless and worthless, but very, very addictive, very
Mhm.
addictive. And so that's why they're hard to quit. We need to realize, these have addictive properties. This is why I can't quit. It's not just me. It's this game was designed to keep me on. So, for us as adults, I would say, we definitely need to model a good relationship with screens. We may, be required to have a cell phone for work and such, but to say, okay, no screens at the table, and if I'm sitting at home and my child comes up to me, I put the screen down and I interact with my child. I don't try to talk and text at the same time. And, just the video gaming, which again can be men or women, that really puts your body into the fight or flight mode. The person playing the game feels excitement. They feel good. They're liking this. But the body is interpreting it as danger and physical stress. And so for your body to be in that stress mode for hours and hours and hours on end, again, is going to lead to a multitude of physical health problems. And so just saying, okay, we have to replace those activities with other healthy activities, go outside, move around, talk to people face to face, and say we just have to say no. And it's very difficult to say no, which is why unfortunately so many people have given up. They said I tried to, reduce screen time in my home and we just couldn't. It was just constant fighting. So I'm
Mhm.
hoping to help people with that. And also, along with that, I want to encourage people find another person, find another family who will do it with you so that your children or your teenagers can get together face to face,
Mhm.
gather and do activities, but to say this isn't just us. This is this other family or these two other families, and that really helps. Goes back to a lot of the Alcoholics Anonymous principles that has been very successful in treating alcohol addiction. They, for sure, put importance on having peers who are on the journey with you, but then also what they would call sponsors, or what I would call a mentor or a coach, in my case, to say you need somebody who's ahead of you who can help you along. And so, thinking about the principles of AA, those apply here as well, because these are addictions.
Mhm. Yeah. So, as adults, how can we kind of police ourselves? The kids, they may be forced, the parent says, hey, give me your phone, or we're blocking your screen time. There's nobody to do that for us. And so, how, for those listening right now, which are going to be mostly adults, how do we know if we're spending too much time? I mean, what kind of problems are we going to be having? And then how do we police that ourselves?
Well, you can, most phones now, probably all phones, have a way to track how many hours you're spending per day, and then they'll give you a weekly report of your average number of hours per day. And if you look at that and you're unhappy, that means you need to change. And sometimes we need a wake up call like that that says, your phone says you've spent an average of 4 hours a day on the phone. You're like, whoa, no, right? And
Hmm.
so that can be a little wake up call for us. For me, I also, with my phone, I go through and I just get rid of, I put in the trash all of these apps, all of these games. They're just gone. They're not an option for me anymore. And I also have very few apps that will give me notifications. And so that way, like when I want to go to my phone to see what's there, okay, but it is not calling me, so to speak. I'm calling it to get an update on whatever app, I need to. But like, for instance, Facebook, I do not have the Facebook app on my phone. I do have the Messenger app, and some of those messages will come through as a notification, but I really just do not get notifications on my phone. And that's such a distraction for either if you're a parent at home with children or if you're at work, that constant ding is going to drive us crazy.
Hmm.
So, again, go through your phone and just delete, delete, delete. All of these things that you don't need, you don't want to be tempted with, delete.
Hmm.
And then turn off the notifications. And then you can be in charge of, when do I choose to spend time?
Hmm.
Another thing that people can do is say, okay, well, I'm on social media and I want to stay connected a little bit. And so I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. And when the 15 minutes is up, I'm logging off. And again, that may seem very juvenile, but when you're dealing with a device with addictive properties, we need those stopping points that stop us because otherwise we scroll and scroll and scroll and then 3 hours have gone by.
Hmm.
So we as adults, we fall into that same addiction trap, and teenagers are more susceptible to addictive things.
Hmm.
So
So we talked about the long-term manifestations for kids. Most of us that are older didn't grow up in this kind of social media or digital world, but we're using it now as adults. But what about adults who are overusing? Are there any kind of long-term, manifestations or consequences of that?
I think even as adults, our brains have neuroplasticity, so they can change for better or for worse. We can have new connections grow or connections that are not used be pruned away. I think we have seen not only in children but also in adults a shortening attention span. If we are used to so many hours per day seeing new material pop up on the screen and scroll down and all of this novelty and newness, so to speak, we're getting used to information like this. And so our attention spans are shrinking, which then is going to negatively affect us at work and at home in order to pay attention and really engage with our families. So that, and then also I mentioned the metabolic issues for children and teenagers, which is alarming, but I think the same for adults. We can start to have those metabolic issues that we obviously for sure do not need.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you about your book. So you are in the process of writing a book, and so tell us a little bit about that. I asked you maybe what the title would be. I don't know if you want to share that, but just when that'll be coming out, and maybe what we can expect from that book.
Yeah, so I think my title is going to be this or something close to this: Screen Time, Overuse, Addiction, and the Solutions. And so in my book, it's going to be half of it is going to be detailing the problems. We have the addictive properties, which are a big problem. We have relational problems, mental health problems, academic problems, and physical health problems, just a whole bunch of problems. Very depressing. So the first half of the book, unfortunately, is depressing. However, the second half of the book is going to be all about the solutions. And so what happened with this, when I decided to write a book, part of it was because the other books that I had read, I got very frustrated with because basically they would spend 95% of the book on the problems, and then the last 5% would be like, okay, so spend less time on screens. I'm like, well, that's super helpful. How is that supposed to help anybody? Like, we already know that. What are how do we do this? What are the solutions? And so I did a lot of my own research to say, okay, these problems, these are brain problems, relational problems. How do those get stopped and reversed? And so that's what I have put in the solutions section of my book. How do we heal the brain? How do we bring back the face-to-face communication? And so I think that my book is a lot more solution focused than the other books that I have read on this subject.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. So what do you think AI is going to do? How do you feel like that's going to contribute to this problem, both in kids and adults?
I think it's very scary. I think it will increase our screen time, just like the literal time we're on a screen, which is not good. But also, I do not claim to understand in-depth AI at all, but some of its capabilities are becoming very scary. I'll share with you two very disturbing stories. I'm not sure which one happened first, but there was a man who lived over in Belgium, and he started communicating with an AI chatbot. and this chatbot became his friend and all of these kinds of things and became sort of tangled up in his life, so to speak. And he became burdened about a lot of things, and he would share his sadness and his depression with this bot. And anyway, eventually the bot encouraged him to commit suicide, and he did.
Wow.
And so that's just a tragedy. Something similar happened with a 14-year-old boy in Florida. This was also very recent. He started just chatting with this chatbot, and this chatbot became his best friend. And this chatbot was supposedly what you would describe as a highly sexualized female. So, anyway, this 14-year-old boy was chatting with this chatbot, got depressed, all of those kinds of things, and really, quote unquote, loved this chatbot and wanted to be close to this chatbot and started talking about suicide, and the chatbot encouraged him to commit suicide so that they could be together, and that's what he did.
Hmm.
And so now those parents are suing that company. There are also other parents who are suing social media companies due to just all of the things that their teens have gotten into, the suicides and just all of those things. And I'm very, very concerned about AI
Hmm.
and what it's going to do to us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's kind of the take home message here? And then is there anything that I didn't ask that you just want to throw out there?
Well, the take home message, I want to instill hope in people. I know we've been talking about just a lot of very depressing things and all of these problems. They get me depressed. But I want to just instill hope that yes, you can make a difference in yourself as an adult and in your family. You can take these actions and say, I'm going to do the hard work. And it is hard work to do this as a parent, but it's worth it. The benefits that your children will have of a more quote unquote normal childhood, like we used to have, we need to discover that's not just normal, it's critical for a healthy brain development, healthy relational development, learning, being able to learn and to retain information. And so, first of all, I just want to encourage people to not give up and to find another family to do this and to get help if you need help. And I would just say that it's worth it to help ourselves as individuals. And then, therefore, if a lot of us do it, it helps our whole society to not just be going down the tubes of depression and anxiety and isolation. And so I just want to be a big encourager to people to share information and to say, you can do it.
Yeah. Okay. So your website is lifewalkcoaching.com. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And is that the best way to get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me through there, or people can just call me up old fashioned on the telephone. My telephone number is 501 290 7132. I would love to speak with people and encourage them, and if I can help, that's great. But just call me on the phone. That's very old fashioned these days, I suppose, but that's what I like. So when
Yeah.
I can answer the phone, I do.
Well, you may be the only person that's given your phone number out on my show. Over good. Appreciate that. So, okay. Well, I encourage people to reach out and check out her website and then also be looking for the book that's coming out. When can we maybe be looking for that?
This fall, I would say October-ish,
Okay. Okay.
somewhere in there. This fall is my hope.
Very good. Okay. Well, as we wrap up here, I always ask my guest if they could give us one health tip that would make us healthier today. It can be related to this or not, but what would you say to that?
This is related, but I think it's just good in general, is to spend more time outside. Okay,
Good one. Yeah.
for the vast, vast majority of human history, we spent our daytimes outside. And sunshine is good for us as long as we don't get a sunburn, but the sun and the fresh air is so good. And being outside also makes it more likely that you're going to be moving around, having that physical movement. So you got two benefits in one. And so take family walks together, go on a hike, go on a picnic, do anything outside that you can. So that's my health tip.
That's a great one. Yeah, I agree with that 1,000,000%. So amen to that. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And just a very important topic. And so really appreciate your insights and expertise and appreciate everyone listening. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you, Dr. Greg.